All right, hello everyone, it's silverkyle, and today I am going to be going over my top 10 favorite books that I read in 2023. Now, a few rules for my top 10 list here. The first one being that not all of these books were released in 2023. I am including books that were released prior to that I read in 2023, although I am happy to say that there are quite a few of 2023 books here. And speaking of my top 10, this isn't just my 10 favorite books that I read in 2023. This is officially ranked number 10 to number 1, which means that if I read more than one book from an author and I liked more than one book in my top 10, they're all going to be there. I know that some booktubers just go with their top 10 books from each author kind of thing, and so you have 10 different authors. No, if I liked a few books from one author in 2023, they're all here. Lastly, I read 22 books in total. I know I was one shy away from hitting 23, and 22 is very small. I am hoping to hit 50 in 2024, so we'll see how that goes, but I'm doing very well already in the first few days of 2024. So let's dive in with the number 10 spot, that being a 2023 novel in The Tyranny of Faith by Richard Swan. This is the second novel in the Empire of the Wolf, and I am absolutely loving this fantasy world that Richard Swan has created. I love the system that's in place with the justices, how they're basically the judge, jury, and executioner, how they have to do more than just a regular fantasy novel where there is kind of this law system that is in place where you have these justices that go around and investigate specific mysteries that are going on in this world. And I love that aspect almost more so than all the other politics that are going on that are leading towards these bigger battles that are generally what you find in fantasy novels. But I'm kind of more interested in the investigations. Granted, I will say that near the end, this series, because Justice of Kings and Tyranny of Faith both end the book perfectly. Richard Swan really knows how to nail that ending. Number 9, speaking of Richard Swan, The Justice of the Kings, the first book in the Empire of the Wolf, I thought did a better job because I got a little bit more of the investigation. And I think I'm a sucker for the openings of worlds and how you're introduced to everything. I enjoyed it a little bit more as well because there is a little bit more of an emphasis on the investigation early on, whereas the second novel just kind of went a little bit more into a different kind of mystery that I wasn't enjoying as much. This seemed much more plain. This seemed much more open world, and the stakes were a lot bigger. If you like that, Tyranny of Faith might be up your alley, but here I liked the kind of smaller battle that they were looking at. Fantastic ending as well. The next one is number 8, which is The Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I've never read anything from Leigh Bardugo until The Ninth House, but I very much enjoyed this. This is an adult fantasy academia book set in the modern world. Reminds me a little bit of Harry Potter, but much more mature in its tones. And the magic system in here is really excellent. The characters especially shine quite a bit within this series. This is the first one in the series, and I'm not sure exactly how many she was going to release, but I very much enjoyed the introduction to this world, really getting a grasp of, once again, a mystery story within this fantasy world as well. I think I'm a sucker for that because that seems to be my kind of thing lately, is having mysteries within fantasy. I'm really enjoying it. Number 7 is The Drift, a 2023 novel by C.J. Tudor. This to me really reminded me of a plot that Stephen King could come up with. There's 3 alternating point of views here with 3 different stories that you alternate. Each chapter you go to the other story. And every time that you're getting near the end of the chapter, you want to stay in that chapter to find out what's going on because it's almost always a cliffhanger, but you're also excited to get back into the other story because you want to know what's happening there at the same time. It's beautifully crafted, and in the end, the ending is nailed quite well. The only thing that this is missing to be a Stephen King book is a lot of character work, because this is more so plot driven, but the plot will keep you going throughout the entire novel. Number 6. I thought this was a 2023 novel, but it's not. It's a 2022 novel. Either way, though, this was fantastic. Exiles by Jane Harper. And this is actually part of a series. This is the last one in the series, apparently, for this character called Aaron Falk. And I loved this. This takes place where the main character is an investigator. So it's a mystery thriller novel, more so on the mystery side and almost a slice of life. And that's what really brought this book up, because I read quite a few mystery novels and thriller novels, and they all kind of feel the same unless they have a really interesting plot idea. They all kind of feel the same. What set this one apart from all of them was the fact that you were dealing with a friend that's an investigator that shows up to meet up with all of his friends from his past, and there ends up being a mystery from years ago that he starts to look into. But it's not really the focus, because you alternate between just him hanging out with his friends and living his life while he's kind of like on vacation over here. And I really enjoyed that aspect. The mystery is good at the same time, but this was really elevated by just following Aaron Falk and his life and how he dealt with people. Character work really goes a long way sometimes, and showing you the side of the basics and the minutia of life is some really good stuff. All right, we're getting into the top 5 favorite books that I read in 2023 with, once again, Leigh Bardugo with her 2023 novel Hellbent. So this is the sequel to Ninth House, and I felt that this one, as good as Ninth House was, this one really surpassed it. There's a little bit of progression that we get with some of the characters, and because of what happened at the end of Ninth House, some of the characters are closer, and you kind of see their bonds that are much stronger now, and you have that sense of friendship that they've created since the last book, and you just get the sense as well that like the characters have matured and are taking things on a little bit more than they used to. And I really enjoyed that. There's also this big cliffhanger that kind of happens near the end of Ninth House and what they're leading towards in Hellbent. And they kind of build that up as well within this book. And I very much enjoyed that. Number 4. The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is my second time rereading this. And that's another thing too. I will include books that I've reread because I still enjoyed this out of every other book that I read this year. Even though it was a reread. I know what's going to happen in this. I've seen the movies numerous times, and this is the second time I'm reading this. But this was such a joy to read as an adult, because the last time I read this was I was 14 years old. And Tolkien's writing is something that takes a little bit more time for me to get through. So if I know that if I want to read maybe like 50 pages or something, I know it's going to take me longer than it would a mystery novel by far, but even other regular fantasy novels. But I end up coming out of it with such a deeper understanding and appreciation for what he's trying to do here. It's just, he has a way with his writing that I absolutely love. And The Two Towers, for the most part, I mean, book is kind of split into 2 different point of views. The first half I absolutely loved, and the second half still had some interesting aspects, just not as good as the first part. If it would have been like the first part, this would be probably higher on my list. All right, number 3 is Salem's Lot by Stephen King. This is everything that I wanted it to be. If you don't know what this is about, I will not spoil it because I feel it's almost better going into this blind. I'll give you the basics, but this is not at all what this book is about. So essentially, this author shows up in Salem's Lot because he used to be there when he was younger, and there were some things that were kind of messed up that happened that have left an impression on him as well, and he wants to kind of go face those fears returning to Salem's Lot. What you get here, though, is a ton of characters that you really feel like you are in Salem's Lot, part of the town, and socializing with everyone here because of Stephen King's work here. Excellently done. And then what ends up happening here is just a ton of fun, and the less you know, the better. So if you don't know, go into this blind. Just know that it is a Stephen King novel. That's all you need to know. Crazy stuff happens, basically. All right. The next book is my number 2 favorite read of 2023. And honestly, for the longest time, it was my favorite of 2023. But one book edged it out at the end of December. So we'll start with what was for the longest time, just by far my favorite book. Nothing was even coming close to it. Salems Lot was excellent, not nearly as good as this. And that is Greg Iles' The Quiet Game, the first in the Pen Cage series. My friend recommended this. He's like, I read quite a bit of books, and one of the ones that I have never read before was Greg Iles. He recommended this, and just, I am a massive fan just from this one book. I am planning to read all the other Pen Cage novels that he has so far, and the 7th one is actually coming out at the end of this year. And I want to be ready for that because this was so good. First of all, this is not like a regular thriller mystery novel. It is over 600 pages long in a paperback. And what you get from that is a much more deeper mystery thriller novel. I love my short mystery thriller novels. Don't get me wrong. But when you are able to really go into detail to expand everything that's going on here and really lay out the lives of these characters and also the politics that are kind of going on around this one specifically, because he's going back to a southern area. Where is he? It's like Natchez, Mississippi. And there's basically there was a murder that happened decades ago when the main character was younger, and it had to do with black politics. And so you kind of get a little bit of a vibe of what that would be like when you go into a southern town like this and kind of dealing with those politics and how things could get just swept under the rug. It's just everything about this was so good. And the other thing too is that Pen Cage is an author who's doing fairly well for himself. And at one point near maybe the middle of the book, or near getting close to the end, he's like, well, I have money, so I'm going to use this money to my advantage. And that's something you rarely ever see in this kind of novel. It's usually just one person versus the world. I really liked it. It was just a very simple thing that he did, but I just thought, hey, that makes sense. And I like that. And then you kind of get this rapport of what he does as well. I really can't spoil it, but I just really liked that. All right. Now, my number 1 favorite book of 2023, because it is a 2023 novel that edged out The Quiet Game, which I did not think was going to happen because I loved that so much. But The Will of the Many. I was hearing so much hype for this, so my expectations were really high, and I was like, there's no way it's going to be as good as people are claiming. And they're saying it's my favorite book of the year by far, and it's one of my favorite books that I've read in years. And I'm like, okay, I'm assuming it'll be good. Everything that they said is accurate. This is one of the best books that I have read in years. This just makes, and the more days that go by, the more I keep thinking about it. And I'm reading something else. I'm like, oh, I'm really enjoying this. But I'm like, man, Will of the Many, though, that was excellent. That was just high tier. And I don't know if it's specifically because of what it's about that made me enjoy it so much. It is a fantasy academia. Once again, there are a lot of questions in this, and you get some answers, but this is part of a series. We're going to get a trilogy here. This is book 1. And I am so in love with the world building, how the magic system works. It is essentially your will that you have is being given up to this empire. So if you are the bottom of this empire, you are giving up quite a bit of your will. And the higher you are, the more will that you get. So you might be the next step. So the majority of people are at the 90% bottom pile of this pyramid where they're giving up their will. So 90% of the people are giving up part of their will to the people on top of the pyramid. And so then you might have the next level, which is the 7th level, and there might be getting like 5 to 10 people's wills. So they're a lot stronger. They're a lot faster. They're a lot more cunning. They're a lot more motivated than you would be. They don't feel necessarily as tired. They can take more damage. But then you get higher and higher, and then you're at like 50 people to 100 people. Now that because of they have so much will, they're able to use magic. And the system in this world uses magic for a lot of their technological advances. It's really, really fascinating. And then also, if people start dying, you start to lose some of your will. So if you have 10 people and 3 of those die, all of a sudden you're going to feel that. Really interesting concept that works really well for this world. And the main character wants nothing to do with it and is trying to avoid it as much as he can. And he ends up going to this school, but he's incredibly smart. So he's able, and you kind of see him rationalizing. He doesn't feel invincible because he does make mistakes. He has a lot of anger issues as well. And we kind of see what he's gone through prior to this empire taking over and what he's had to do to fend for himself for so long, trying to avoid this world. Just so much good stuff. The characters in this, there is a line in here for one of the characters that is extremely gruff, and it's like 1 or 2 pages about where the line is for when people can change you, and if you have where that line is drawn for when you are now just basically a puppet for what other people want you to be. So well done. I love this book. If you have not read The Will of the Many, I highly recommend it. If you are not in the mood for reading like a 600-page fantasy academia book, get the audiobook. This is so worth it. It's incredible. I cannot wait for book 2 and book 3. I am so upset. Of all the books that are kind of like trilogies that are done or whatever, this one, I just had to pick up one that is not done, and I have to now wait until July. So frustrating. So there you go. That is my top 10 favorite books that I read in 2023. Let me know in the comments below what your top 10 are. And specifically, if you enjoyed some of the others that I mentioned, more so The Will of the Many. Thank you all for watching. You have been bearded in. Beardage.